welcome everyone to studio. We've got a packed studio, not a chair to be had. We've got Professor Zak Nel with us today and Caleb Rudnick joining the session. So wonderful to have you both. Hilton in his usual seat, ready to give long and interesting questions to the group. So Prof, why don't you start off with telling us a bit about what keeps you busy, a little bit about your background?
I think my passion started when I was a young teacher way back in the beginning of the 70s. I found myself in Durban being something called a teacher counselor. It was a wonderful 2 years of my life, by the way. But there's something that struck me during those early years of my career, and I found that if kids in grade 9 get their subject choices right, especially the boys, if they can see where they're going in life, it makes such a big difference. And that one factor has been with me my whole life. And I think it's a one big motivation. And I've done a lot of my research about it. And life has taken me into very interesting roads, and I was very happy. I was the head of a counselling psychology department. And I've trained quite a lot of the counselling psychologists, but always my life seems to come back to this grade 9 subject choices that make such a big difference, because I think there I saw the basis of how people can see themselves moving forward, how it can motivate them in their lives, how it can make them happy, and how it can really get kids to learn. And this is where life has taken me, and I'm still busy with that one thing that drives me.
Well, I know that you're the go-to person I refer to whenever I get a request for career counselling, so it's wonderful that you're there filling that purpose. Caleb, tell us a bit about what you're busy with.
So my name is Caleb, and I'm currently doing honours in philosophy. I just finished honours in film and television a couple of months ago, and I guess my only credential is that I'm kind of confused about my career. So that's really all that's noteworthy about me.
Okay. Well, I think it's wonderful to have your voice in the conversation, because often we speak about these topics without the people in the room that are maybe most faced with that issue. So, Hilton, any welcoming comments from you?
Yes, definitely. I first of all want to really extend a welcome to Prof Zak Nel. I'm not even sure if he knows it, but he was really very pivotal in my life. He ushered me through my master's degree and was a mentor to me in many, many ways. And so it's a real thrill for me to be having a conversation with you probably 25 years later. And really, I understand the impact that a mentor can make on your life, and you were really instrumental in the direction that my life took. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. Those are very kind words. But can I return it and say you've really been one of the outstanding students? And if there was really somebody that I've enjoyed teaching and mentoring, it was Hilton.
Thanks so much for that.
It's so nice. So I think what interested me in this topic, Prof, is that in our coaching business in Omnicore, and also just with working with the youth, we hear a lot of struggle around choosing career currently. How do you choose a career? It seems that the world of work is changing. The degrees have not necessarily changed, and the way that we possibly select subjects for school, you mentioned that in your introduction. Do you see the landscape changing over the times in the last few years you've been working in selecting career choice? Do you see people struggling with career choice?
Without doubt. And I would say also adult working people. And I think one of the reasons is that we're living in an ever-changing world. It is like a whirlpool of dramatic changes that happens not only in careers but also in the lives of people, and society changes. There are just such dramatic changes and uncertainty and new things coming up and new tendencies. It must be very confusing, especially for a young person that wants to enter the job market. And I would say this is the mega trend, this ever-changing, uncertainty, big, wide world, where people would also work internationally, by the way, and not only in South Africa. The problem is, where do we start? You know, what is the best starting point? And I couldn't help listen to you, and I was so interested in what you said, Caleb. But what drew you specifically? Because it sounds like you studied film and television studies.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what pulled you towards it?
I've always enjoyed watching movies, and I guess I thought it would be fun to make movies as well. And when I was thinking about doing that degree, I just couldn't really think of any other job I would be able to do in terms of like office work or other careers. So it seemed like it would be a fun job and also something that I would enjoy doing. And those were in the background when I was applying for it. When I looked at the application page at Wits, there was like a lot of subjects, and it was just one of the only ones I could imagine doing as a career.
Okay. It's very personal, but can I just ask you, it sounds like you've completed the degree now.
Yeah, I finished it a couple of months ago.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I say that's a BA Film and Television Studies at Wits. It's a 4-year degree, an incredible demanding degree.
Yeah.
What a major achievement.
Thank you so much.
But it sounds like you're a bit uncertain on the way forward now.
Yeah, I am. I guess I had a lot of experiences when I was doing the degree where it was very intense. And it kind of gave me some second thoughts about doing that for the rest of my life. It was just, it was very stressful. So it just made me reconsider if it was something that I would be able to do at all. But it was a lot of that.
I wonder if I could come in there, because I think, and maybe you could share with us, Prof, if it's a thing, but a lot of times when people are selecting a career, and they romanticize what the career is going to do for them. And I remember when, I chose my first careers, and I've had 5 different careers. I mean, I've had many jobs, but 5 completely different careers. And you don't understand the kind of nitty-gritty of what that role actually is. So like even when I became a psychologist, I was really surprised when I had my own practice, how much admin there was in that practice. And, I kind of had a view that I'll just be spending all my time having these wonderful conversations with people, and that was actually only a small part of the job. And Caleb's experience of enjoying going to movies, but then having a career in movies, are completely different.
Indeed, Hilton. Often what you study, it prepares you for the world of work, but it's never a perfect preparation because, especially if you go in film and television studies, I mean, there's such a lot of pressure and there's such a lot of stress and there's such a lot of working with people and there's contracts to be signed, and you must work with teams of people and there's incredible lot of logistics with it. And then you haven't even be coming to the actual filmmaking. So it's quite true what you say.
Yeah, definitely.
So then, Prof, what do you do in this situation? And I've heard this also multiple times. People have finished a degree. They realize probably halfway through it's not the thing they're going to do for the rest of their life. They're just going to, fussbait, as we say in Afrikaans. They're going to finish it. And then what? Then they start studying another degree because there is just this inability or this difficulty to find exactly what the person wants to do. How do you advise people with that situation?
Can I take, Caleb, excuse me, can I use this as an example,
Go ahead.
And I'm also speaking a bit out of ignorance here, but in my mind, I think the film and television world is an enormous big world, and with these many, many corners to it and many different application sides to it, there's from the producing side to the script writing side to editing, to post work that you must do. I would really think a good starting point is to start. Otherwise, I have worked with a young guy and he's 17th year in the trap where he's still now on a a gap year after he graduated, So there's a danger that you can get caught in a vacuum. And I would really reckon to start is actually a good point of departure. And once you are in the industry, I think there's many ways how you can reposition yourself. But without a starting point, you can't do the repositioning. And often, can I also say, and we've all gone through this, there is a bit of a reality check. And it's like, welcome to the working life. Because a lot of the things that you can do, that you're going to do, you won't like, and you won't like some of the people that you work with. But it's a way of dealing and coping with it. How do you do it? You must start.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's very valuable. So then how do you go about advising someone who hasn't yet chosen their careers? You spoke about the subject choice being very important. But how would you advise somebody to choose a career that will convert to a job one day? Because there are many degrees that you can do, but then when the reality comes to find a job is difficult.
I would say that process in my mind would start typically in the grade 9. That's why my life always takes me back to the grade 9s. But I think with the subject choices, it is possible already to stream yourself. And it's quite interesting. I've just came back from an overseas visit, and we think it's only in South Africa where you would stream yourself, let's say at the end of the grade 9 year going to grade 10. But there are very radical streamings all over the world for kids from the age about 14, 15. In some countries you actually go to a different school. You would go to a technical school or an engineering school. In South Africa we don't follow that pattern. We allow kids in the same school just to choose a package of subjects that would suit them. Now, very often the package of subjects would put them on a certain career track, and it's not too early to do it. But this would give kids a kind of a goal to work towards, And especially, let's say, if they choose, if I can just show something, if they would choose, let's say, something like physical science, maybe geography and EGD, engineering, graphics and design, that clearly starts to prepare them to an engineering track, And there's so many wonderful new generation of cutting-edge engineering degrees that you can do nowadays, from things like computer engineering to information engineering. It's not like just the old mechanical engineering or civil engineering. There are fantastic mechatronic engineering. There's a fantastic world of problem-solving engineering degrees that you can do nowadays. But, if you can go back again to the subject choices, that would be at least a starting point for people to position themselves on the way forward.
Prof, I'm interested to hear your approach that you take when someone comes to your offices and they're finishing off school and they're wondering what to go and do. What do you take them through that helps give them clarity?
I rely still on the psychometric test because I think at least this is something that we have, let's say in the counselling psychology, in the industrial psychology, that at least it's our tools.
Right.
And there are, despite all the criticism against the testing, there are still some very good tests, but one must just be careful with the interpretation, obviously. But I think this is the tools of our trade. And there's many of these very good tests that you can do. But I would start with the psychometric assessment.
And with what category? Do you use personality, interest, cognition?
Nowadays, I rely mainly on two things. It might be a bit of a naive stance, but I still think the starting point of everything is the person. That's the personality. So it's important because we know that certain personalities fits into certain kinds of careers. So I like the personality fit factor. Second thing, the older I become, the more I realize I really try to put a lot of emphasis on what I would call the neuroscience things these days. That is how the brain processes information. Because it's quite interesting, the people that would complete the test, they can't steer that, It's like an inborn thing. So I would attach a lot of value to, let's say, a dominant thinking style, from a diagnostic maybe to investigative thinking to analytical thinker, because we know why are some people more successful in jobs than others. Although they might have the same personality, they would have different thinking patterns. And this is a very important thing that I try to establish. Let's say, especially with grade 11s and grade 12s moving into choices of careers and also what they must study.
So Caleb, a question for you. When you're at university, do you hear other students feeling that they're studying stuff that they're not really that happy about? What's the kind of talk that goes on around the graduates?
Oh yeah, I hear a lot of that, and a lot of that, especially out of my class. In fact, out of the people that graduated from the degree, I'm not sure how many are in film and TV jobs right now. A lot of them, I think, are doing other stuff. But yeah, I think it's a big thing, especially with the people that you talk to. And yeah, it reminds me of the movie Slacker, which is where everyone doesn't really know what's going on. And I think that university is pretty much just a big place like that.
And I wonder if that matters as much as we think. Is just going to university and learning how to take in large quantities of information, to write assignments, to be able to do research, is the meta skills that are just important in whatever kind of job you would go to. And maybe not going into a job even directly connected to your degree is not the biggest issue. I certainly resonate with what Prof was saying around your first job doesn't have to be a dream job. If you go a job and you start building a portfolio at work, that's a good start in the world of work, whatever it is. And even if it's not the stuff that you love, at least you're in there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So Prof, how did you get into your career? Did somebody give you some guidance in grade 9?
Not really. We were so naive, let me tell you. It's shockingly, and we were very unfamiliar with careers. In fact, if I can just quickly relate the story to you, like nowadays, we also had to choose subjects in grade 9, at the end of grade 9, going into grade 10. But at our school, it was a typical conservative Afrikaans school. The choice was made by the headmaster.
Wow.
So he went around, he pointed at the learners and he said, physical science, history, and Latin. This is where I found myself. But the point, it was a different era, and one must be very careful not to compare eras. But I have, I went to Stellenbosch University. I must say I was a very happy student. I really liked studying. I liked being at the University Res. Stellenbosch was a wonderful, I'm talking about 60s now, early 60s, a wonderful time, by the way. Also, it was in the Vietnam hippie era, and it certainly affected us in South Africa as well. And being a conservative Afrikaans young guy, it was a huge, wonderful world that was, I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed my studies at Stellenbosch University. And interesting enough, I did an honours in psychology, and then a wise old man that was head of the psychology department, he actually one day gave me very advice. He said, Meneer Nel, gaan doen 'n onderwysdiploma. Do a teaching diploma. And it was a wonderful advice, and this is where I found myself 2 years doing teaching. And then I really, from that, I did a master's degree and eventually a PhD, and I got a postgraduate scholarship studying at Minnesota University. But I just wanted to say, I was actually very lucky that I like studying, and I had some very good friends around me, and university was a wonderful, enriching experience for me. But did I ever deliberately choose to do this? No, life has taken me in that route, But I must say, looking back now at my experience, I think learning from on the job, learning from that first job as a teacher, counselor, seeing the value of the grade 9 subject choices, that actually drove me my whole life, as I said in the beginning,
When you're working in a career that you're not happy, what is the impact? I'm sure you see people coming into your practice.
Yeah, without doubt nowadays. And I would say especially in the corporate world, especially the demands in the corporate world is just tremendous, And very often people would earn very good salaries, and then you get caught in a trap where you can't escape the corporate world because you earn a very decent living, you've got a family, and you need to pay the car. And there are huge pressures, especially on the higher level management, people working in the corporate. But eventually, can I just say, my own philosophy is we just got one life. We just got one life. And sometimes I just see people around their mid-40s where the price becomes too high, and you see these desperate, unhappy, stressed up people. It's like all of the sunshine has been stolen out of their lives, And then I ask myself, is it worth the while? Is it worth the while? And very often, it is typical here in the mid-40s, I think it's a very good thing to stand back in your life, because often kids then are moving towards the end of their high school career, in the family, and one would ask yourself, where am I going now? To take stock, and to make that kind of important life decision. But no, you see a lot of unhappy people in their jobs, and it's very sad to see it.
And how easy is it to transition at that age to another career? Have you got examples of where you've done some career counselling midlife, and they've totally switched up their career?
Yes, I can quote many examples, I really, because the majority of the people I see are actually adults. I just feel that one must really build on your previous experience, What I mean is, it's not to make dramatic shifts. Can I relate the story while I'm talking? I've met a wonderful guy that's a qualified medical doctor. And it was his passion. He's finished his degree. He was very happy. He worked 3 years as a doctor. And then he said he always has this thing for traveling. So he actually works as a waiter on the airplanes. I said, he must be the most qualified air steward there is, but he's extremely happy, and it works very well for him, And I said, how do you integrate your medical training with being an air steward? He said, you'll be surprised how many people becomes ill on the airplane, and they always call him,
Wow.
And then he would assist them. But he made this choice, and he's extremely happy. He said he's got the opportunity, he can visit the most interesting countries, and he writes about it, and he says eventually he thinks he might become what is known as a travel doctor now, but he's still happy in doing what he does. The point is that I think one must have your dreams, and you must think about it, because can I just say, it is not so easy to change jobs. If you're in this middle-level management job market, especially if you earn a decent salary, it is not so easy, because on the one hand, everyone thinks they're an entrepreneur. And we can talk a lot about the entrepreneurship. There are some extremely good examples of people that became entrepreneurs, but it is not as easy as you would think.
I mean, it's very useful to just climb into that point over there. And I'm wondering, when you're doing career counseling, is there ever a time where you're advising people to forget about the education and just jump into the job market, start your own business? I mean, we're in the gig economy. There's been a great democratization in being able to do things that before required a lot of infrastructure, now are relatively easy. Or are you in the school where you kind of would value, do some tertiary education and then do it as a backup.
You know, I'm the last person that says the beginning and end of all is a university degree. I'm really the last person to say that. And I can quote you many good examples of people that's made huge successes, especially in the business world, without the benefit of a university degree. The point is, the chances of being a successful entrepreneur, Hilton, without a qualification, it's very slim. You can look, the success rate is most probably about something like 15%. So for people to make a success, I would say on their own, at least they need to have some business knowledge, you know. They need to know something about budgets, how to manage cash flows. They must know something about contracts. Where do you get that? You get it from a BCom degree. I'm not saying a BCom will earn you success, but at least it will give you a good information where you can start, and also where you can look at the sectors where you can move into, because with entrepreneurship is always what kind of entrepreneurship, you know, how do you discover your passion, and how can you make a business success of that? And that is where I think you need a bit of knowledge from studying, you know.
Well, I think that thing that you've just said there now about discovering your passion, that's become, you know, the forefront for how people choose careers. What is my purpose? What is my passion? Is that something that you would consider when people are making a career choice?
Without doubt, without doubt. If you can find that passion, and sometimes it takes a little time to help people to formulate a passion, you know. They can dream about it, but it's how you put it in words. And can I tell you a true story? I've met an interesting guy. He says he grew up as a very poor boy on an agricultural holding, and all he knew was about planting beans and having some chickens on the agricultural holding, and maybe they said everyone had a bit of pigeons. And he said he did quite well in matric, but he always thought that he loved agricultural things, you know. And then he said he got a scholarship. He studied a BSc, a Greek degree, and once he finished the degree, he didn't know what to do. So he said, fortunately, the old professor there arranged for him to work on one of these feeding stations, you know. And he said, then, and he mixed the food for the cattle there. And he said he watched it. As the food dropped on the ground, some pigeons would come and pick it up, you know, and would eat it. And he said he watched them as they fly. It looks like they flew better. And then he had some pigeons of his own, and he started to mix some food, very legally, by the way, nothing illegal. And he watched it, and he said the pigeons just flew so much better once they've ate the food, you know. And eventually he did a bit of racing on his own, and he had some successes.
Pigeon racing,
yeah. And he said then he won the $1 million race at Sun City with his pigeon. And then everyone wants to buy some of the chicks. But he said, he was very honest, he said, I'm not a good breeder, but it's the food. And he said everyone wanted to buy his pigeon food. So after 6 months he resigned his job. He's the biggest pigeon racing food producer in the world. He says there's more money in pigeon racing than in horse racing, for instance. He said he exports the pigeon racing food to 86 different countries. But the point why I'm telling this story is a wonderful story, isn't it? But his passion was always these agricultural pigeon things which he grew up with, you know, and he just had this lucky break in life. But the point is, Hilton, it is, where is your passion, you know?
How do you find that? How do you articulate your passion?
It is, I would say sometimes it is a bit of a therapeutic process, and it is the way how you can guide a person, and often also starting even with primary school and high school years, you know, and rediscovering those, let's say, the inner voice of a person, you know, and also things that has happened to people. But and it's very, very important for me, especially with adults. I would sit about 40 minutes and 50 minutes. I would just first listen to them, and I would hear their life stories, and I would try to help them to formulate the passion, you know.
So it's quite an art, actually.
It is an art, you know, because very often people will come and tell you, I'm very creative. But what does creative means, you know? What kind of creativeness? Because I'm sure in your case, Caleb, it's like an audiovisual creativeness that you get. But it's how you put words to it and how you actually go into depths and find that passion. Also listening a bit, you know, like a good old psychologist would do.
Prof, a lot of people by default land up in the BA, in the humanities. They land up doing something at university. Maybe they didn't have the higher level maths for matric, or for whatever reason they land up doing a very general BA. How do you work with those people in kind of taking the steps after that, when they've got sociology and philosophy and psychology or English or something as majors?
Hilton, the lesson I've learned was in America, when I studied in America. And you know, in South Africa, we tend to underestimate the value of a good BA liberal arts degree. When I was in America, I cannot tell you, it was a wonderful discovery that I've made at Minnesota University, how highly value a BA liberal arts is, and how it allows young people to put the most wonderful choices of modules and subjects together, where they can also discover their own intellectuality and where they can discover maybe a love for languages or a love for reasoning, you know. So I personally value a BA degree very highly, you know. And if I can just mention it to you, one of my favorite BAs is at UCT down in Cape Town. They've got the most incredible subject choices that you can build in the BA. They would even allow you, by the way, not only to take statistics, but even some things like genetics that you can put in a BA if there's not a clash on a timetable. And so I just want to say to people, please don't underestimate the BA. There is also some BAs in South Africa are more difficult than engineering degrees, by the way. I can really show you some examples. If I may quote another example, Stellenbosch runs the most beautiful BA International Studies, where you must use a foreign compulsory subject like Mandarin or German or French that must go into that degree with economics and philosophy. It's a wonderful BA degree, but it's a very difficult one, and it can open some great doors for people. And sometimes we caught in the trap, you know, there's a trap that we have in South Africa. People always say, take physical science, it opens the doors for you. But it is not true. Often I found the physical science actually closes doors for a lot of people. And then we've got this great attachment to maths. You know, it's like maths open the doors of heaven for you. And it's not true, you know. It's not true. There's many, many wonderful things that you can do with a thing like maths literacy, you know. And the value of that comes out in a very good BA liberal arts. And by the way, the happiest students that I came across in my life are students that had the choice to choose their own subjects. As soon as you get some of these compulsory packages of subjects that students must do, it starts to kill their soul. While if they have the choice, it motivates them, it brings out the happiness in their lives, you know. And very often I found, like for instance in America, BA liberal arts in the world of business would be even more highly appreciated than, let's say, an accounting degree, for instance, you know.
Okay.
I think Caleb has experienced the bit about killing his soul with subjects.
Yeah, I can totally speak to that because in second year for Film and TV, there was a prepackaged thing of subjects where you can take any BA academic major. You could only take one called drama and film, which I didn't like that much. So I eventually dropped that subject and it delayed me finishing that degree by a year. But I think what I tell people is that I wouldn't have finished it if I couldn't have dropped that subject because it just made me that much more unhappy just doing that one subject.
Well, I mean, you did pick up the philosophy honors out of that, which is a gift in itself.
Yeah, I know. I'm very grateful that because of that I ended up doing philosophy. I don't. I'm grateful for that.
But can I just check at Wits they would allow you to have done Philosophy 1 in the BA Film and Television Studies as an elective?
Yeah, you can. So from now, the year after I got there, actually, you could take any academic major. So you could do English or anything and take it to the third year, and then have that as your academic major. And so you could do English until third year and then graduate with film, which you couldn't do when I was there. So I had to stay back.
Prof, what do you think of the famous gap year?
Can I... forgive me if I sound so outspoken. Forgive me. But the era of the gap years is gone.
Wow.
It's very, very often it serves no purpose. It makes sense. Can I just say why? You know, in the 70s and 80s, if young people, especially in our country, if they went to the army, it served some purpose, and the university would cater for that. But nowadays, the problem is the universities would accept that you would arrive there with your fresh matric knowledge, and they would bold the degrees directly on it. Take the engineering degree, for instance. You know, that maths and science is incredibly important, and the IT programming is very important. Now, if you take a gap year, that knowledge get very rusted. And I found from my own research that I've done, a gap here seldom brings clarity. I only think there's one gap here that serves a purpose, and it's a gap here that's often tied to a religious motive. If you want to go and do some community service, for instance, I love the kids that would go to Israel and do a gap year there. And there's a couple of those programs here in South Africa available as well. But otherwise, I have found the gap here becomes actually a very destructive, negative year, and it seldom brings new insights into choices. And in fact, sometimes it gets like a trap that you can't escape out of it, you know, because especially with the boys, what's the big dream? They want to work on a yacht. You know? So they work on those yachts, and then it is like they can't get moving in life. I've met a young guy, he's in his 24th year of a gap year.
Wow.
What?
And now... you know, there's nothing wrong with it if it's that kind of lifestyle that you preferred, but it's like he's too old really now to go to university. He can't sit with the first year students anymore. So please forgive me, but I'll try to prevent a gap year as far as possible.
That's so interesting.
I mean, in my own experience, I did my gap year, I think, between my degree and honours, or maybe between honours and masters. I took it somewhere there, and it was a really enriching experience to do it once I had kind of felt I had a qualification behind me. And then, I mean, I wasn't really doing it for clarity, I was doing it for adventure. And it really served a good purpose in that way. But I agree with you that going and doing it when you're 18 years old and you don't know anything about the world, I mean, I think is probably a naive idea and probably more destructive than useful.
Hilton, what you did was not really a gap year. It was a sabbatical. Sorry.
Okay.
Prof, what do you see with the trends coming around AI and job losses and, you know, a whole layer for people who would now not have opportunities to work as AI takes those roles? Do you think that you're seeing the impact of that yet?
Yes, no doubt. We must take the whole thing of the artificial intelligence, the informatics, even, you know, the things of IT. We must take it very seriously. There's no doubt, if you look at all of these mega trend career predictions, it is a major factor, and we already see it in the impact in our own banking world here in South Africa, where there's some severe job losses that goes with that. It certainly is a serious consideration. On that note, if I could just say, if I was the Minister of Education, I would have certainly made a subject called CAT, the computer application technology, the compulsory subject, because kids must be computer literate. It's an absolute necessity. And there's a lot of new jobs that are created in those fields. The point is, is it everyone's direction? No, absolutely not. And it is not. It's not for everyone, but it needs some consideration, you know. And this is why I really like this new cutting edge new generation of engineering degrees that we've got, you know, like the computer engineering, the mechatronic engineering, because I think it really prepares kids very well for the future. But in the end, and maybe it's a kind of a way that I pacify myself. I just say a computer can never replace a relationship. And this is at least, I think, anything that has to do with people, relations, creativeness, it's very difficult for a computer to actually to take over those areas.
And also limbs.
So, Prof, I wanted to ask you just about the kind of, if you look at South Africa as a particular instance, I mean, where do you see the big gaps that need to be filled in careers? I mean, if people wanted to ensure that they had jobs sometime in the future, where do you see those gaps?
Hilton, can I just start on that note to say lots of people I see are very honestly negative about the future in South Africa. And I must be honest with it, you know. And I think half of the young people I see actually wants to study abroad. And we must take this tendency very seriously. It shows you that there's a younger generation that feels there's no future for them in the country, you know. And I mean, we don't need to go into reasons, but it's a reality factor. So I just want to say it's something that we need to work with. And maybe the politicians must take note of this as well. But in any case, to come back to the question, where is the career tendencies? I would say it's not really so different from the international world of work, you know. It is typical in the artificial intelligence world, in the computer. I would reckon, especially in South Africa, it's not really necessarily in the banking sector, but in the finance sector, because we've got some very, very good investment financing companies, you know. And there's certainly, and I think if I look at some of the mega trend predictions for our country, I think we might have a boom in areas like the tourism industry. If we can just get a bit of more political, let's say, leadership, I think we might have it's like Namibia and Botswana, you know, and Kenya, because we've got such lovely things to offer, and there's such wonderful entrepreneurship opportunities in the tourism industry, you know. But I would reckon also anything that has to do with the digital design things, you know, with the graphic design, information design, and those kind of things, and things like, I think, digital marketing, you know, but and certainly anything, I would say, especially in engineering fields as well, you know. But it's in those areas that I think there's huge shortage. Also, can I just maybe add to, I always say to young people, you can't go wrong to go into teaching, because we've got a great need for good teachers. And then can I just say the other thing, anything that has to do with community development. You know, we've got these very disadvantaged communities, the unemployed thing, and I think the great answer to South Africa's future is about communities, how we can bring the best out of communities, you know. The great old thing of Ubuntu, and how we can also motivate people to look after each other in the communities, to discover the strengths in the communities. So I think in those areas there must certainly be great opportunities, also in things like, you know, typical like your nursing areas and the medical supporting areas as well.
So, Prof, when you see people from the corporate environment and they come to you and they say, I want to change careers, how do you differentiate between someone who's just burnt out in that particular job or someone who really does now indeed need to change careers?
It's a very important diagnosis to make. It's very important because obviously if a person is just burned out, there are really remedial things that one can do to help them, you know, and very often then it's not a job change, it's not necessary. It is really to help the person to cope with the stress. And there are many successful ways you can do it. But if it is not a burned out factor, And if it's a real deep need to change and to find something more meaningful in life, I would say it would start with a narrative process where you would sit with the person, and each one is different. This is why I would never go, and Hilton knows it, I would never go for group processes in this, because each person's history is different, their family circumstances are different, their dreams are different, and it's a discovery process that can only be done on an individual basis.
And in sort of the same discussion point, do you encourage people who maybe don't do so well in particular subjects? Let's say it's my dream to be a doctor, but my maths mark is terrible and my science mark is terrible. Would you break that to them in a sense, or do you encourage people to work harder on those weaknesses?
Using the psychometric results, I have promised myself in the end I would be as honest as possible with people, and especially high school kids. So if a person comes to me, and lots of people would have dreams of becoming medical doctors, but I think there's an ethical thing that rests on me to tell them this will most probably not work, and I would spell it out very directly. I mean, there are ways that you can still give people the truth and motivate them, and where you don't need to destroy people. But if you carry on with an unrealistic dream, then it becomes a nightmare in the end, So I would honestly tell them, and there's many ways, I would use them for the medicine. You can even predict it in grade 9 already on the academic achievement, and I would tell them certain points that they need to score, and I would show them how far they're off the mark, and then I would honestly tell them, this will not work. And there's only one way to say it, unfortunately.
Prof, how do you keep up with the fast-moving world of emerging careers and just being able to counsel people with all the change that's happening?
Hilton, I won't say that I can keep up with everything. But fortunately, one of my great passions is information. and a lesson I've learned in America is this mega trend research, where you can look at the future of jobs, where you can try to predict it. Often, the team that I work on, we often get it wrong. Just listen to me, it's not so easy to get it right. But I like that kind of thing of making what I would call megatrend research and megatrend prediction. But one of the important things that I really try to do, I would visit each university at least once a year. And I would ask even the private universities, because I'm very much in favor. We've got some excellent private institutions down these days in South Africa. I can give you many where I think they would exceed the quality that you get at the public universities. But I would make the point, I would visit those institutions. I will speak to them and I'll ask them what's new. I would go down to UCT, I would go down to Stellenbosch University. The people knows me. I would go down to Potch, and I'll ask them, what are the new trends? What are the new subjects that goes into the degrees, which are the new modules, which are the new postgraduate qualifications that you bring in. And it's nice. I like it because it gives me opportunity to find out what's going on at the universities. But this is where I get most of the information. And then I would also try to speak to some informed business people over many years, that would tell me, because can I just make a confession? I'm very ignorant when it comes to the IT fields. Very ignorant. But I would speak to those people and I would ask them, what are the new trends? What are the job titles? How can you upgrade your qualifications? But personally, I like to do this thing very much.
Okay.
So, for say Caleb's situation, I mean, just taking the next steps once you qualified and you now have to decide where do you go with 2 degrees, for example, in his case, what would you suggest?
Caleb, it seems to me that you are in a wonderful position in this sense. I'm not saying this to be nice to you, but it seems to me that you've discovered besides your visual design creativeness, also a thing that I would call intellectuality, and that most probably goes with the philosophy, hey? And it seems like you really liked philosophy.
Oh, yeah, I loved it. It's amazing.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Philosophy is very interesting because you would get many people that would be passionate about it. But the question is, how do you make a job out of it?
Right.
You know, because there's just so limited philosophy lecturing positions. But can I just say that I have found with that kind of intellectuality, it brings up a bit of a critical thinking process. And very often, those people actually makes very good lecturers. Interesting enough, you know. And if I don't know your background, so I'm very synonymous here, but I would most probably consider to see if I can't move into a master's in philosophy where you can combine the philosophy maybe with things like the world of film and media, advertising, the ethical things that goes around it, you know. And this would most probably mean looking at doing a good master's in philosophy, like maybe the one at Edinburgh University or maybe one at Berkeley, you know. So I would combine the audiovisual film creativeness maybe with a master's degree in philosophy, and then I would see how you can lecture that, because very often with these ethical decision making things, you would have it in the film world as well, you would have it in the radio world. If you can look at just what happened at the SABC, we've got lost at the SABC because we've lost in a certain. I hope the people that listen out there would know we lost our ethical compass at the SABC. That's why a guy like you, they would need a voice like you in that capacity, honestly, you know. But I would really encourage you to look at the good, maybe, and shame your poor parents, but investing it maybe in a master's in philosophy, but a good overseas one.
Yeah.
That's
What
great.
do you think of that?
We'll start fundraising.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting option. Yeah, definitely.
And as we kind of start wrapping up, I'm asking a question which maybe I should have asked at the beginning, but what are your pet sort of myths that people spread around career counselling and choosing careers?
The pet myths. I would say a pet myth could be where the test is meaningless. You know, I often found it, but can I just say sometimes there might be truth in it, because you would get some of the, and by the way, there's not many professional career counsellors in the country. You would think there's lots, but there isn't. We're actually very few. But you would find some career counsellors, unfortunately, would select the wrong package of tests, you know, and then they would do tests that's more suitable in a clinical psychology background, where you would bring up pathology to people.
Right.
And so there are some myths around the psychometric testing. Then I think the other myth is that the career counsellor must tell you what you must do. That you come there with the expectation that this guy is going to tell me exactly what I must do. And the process doesn't really work like that. I think you come with the wrong expectations. I think the other myth is that sometimes, I think with younger generation of people, they would think my parents have no role in this. You know? So I don't want the parents to be involved, but I would insist, or especially with high school children and even with students, that I want to see the parents as well. So the people that listen out there, the parents are part of that process. But I would say those are most probably the greatest myths that I came across.
Thank you so much. Any closing questions from you?
No,
Martin?
I am interested just in following up on that parent idea. Why is it so important for you to have the parent as part of the career conversation?
Okay. Because in the end, I think the parents pay for this. And they must feel that they're part of the decision, you know. And I think it's in the end, it's good for the relationship of the young people with their parents as well. Because that's the way you build constructive relationship. Just the other night, I spoke at one of the schools about the choices, how kids must make the grade 9 choices. And I told the parents, I said, the most important thing with the choice is, once you've done this exercise, you must have a better relationship with your grade 9 learner than before. And I think it's a great thing how you can build a relationship with your parents. Because what's important in life, it's our family and what happens after we've studied, and to keep good contact and good relationships with your parents. Because in the end, we only have the families in life that we can look after. And there's nothing wrong to have good relationship with parents.
Okay.
Not like the parents must make the decision, but to get them involved in the process.
Well, I think that's something you're very good at doing, Prof. Anyone who talks about you speaks so highly of you. So thank you so much. Caleb, any final questions, comments?
No, not really. It was just very interesting hearing your thoughts.
Caleb, we can certainly, sorry, I don't want to offer a service to you, but we can certainly talk about some good master's degrees in philosophy overseas after this.
Yeah, definitely.
But Hilton, can I just say, it's so wonderful to see you here.
Thanks,
again.
yeah,
Okay,
thank
and
you.
I've really, and thanks for leading the discussion as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.